from New Westminster Burnaby for his intervention on this question of privilege. Colleagues, we are now moving into the period for statements by members. The honourable member from Vaughan Woodbridge.
Mr. Speaker, I rise to highlight the relentless efforts of Canada's only non-profit organization focused on advancing Lyme disease research.
Just you can notice that the whole entire house is all ready for Christmas. Like, they're too ready because they're not even showing up now. Like, they probably wouldn't even show up on Monday, Tuesday next week if we weren't getting the fall economic statement.
Fund research, improve testing, and Lyme disease treatment for all Canadians. Just a few weeks ago, the G. Magnotta Foundation renewed its commitment to Lyme disease research with a $2 million gift over the next 2 years to the G. Magnotta Lab at the University of Guelph. Along with dozens of friends and neighbours, on September 18th, I joined Rosanna and Lab Director Dr. Melanie Wills at the annual Vaughan Walk for Lyme to show our community's hope and resolve to combat this terrible disease. Embodying the G. Magnotta Lab's mantra, driven by passion, fueled by philanthropy, the unmatched generosity of Vaughan residents is once again a beacon of hope for a healthier future for all. Thank you to Rosanna, the entire team of the G. Magnotta Foundation for their leadership. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
You're here. The honourable member for Moose Jaw Lake Centre, Lanigan.
Mr. Speaker, in 1994, my mother visited me when I was living and studying in England. We toured Canterbury Cathedral, where she wrote out a prayer request. That prayer has stayed with me from that moment on. Her prayer was salvation from my family. The true gift of salvation came as a baby born in a manger in Bethlehem over 2,000 years ago. It is a gift if you acknowledge who that baby was and became to be and what he did on the cross for you and me. His name was Jesus, Emmanuel, God is with us. Christmas won't be the same without Mom and Dad this year, having lost them both in October, but they lived lives of faith and knew Christ. But I know hope still remains. The reminder of the gift of salvation comes every Christmas. And so I want to let everyone here who hears my voice, I want to wish them a very Merry Christmas and a very Scottish Happy Hogmanay. God bless you. Have a Merry Christmas. You are not alone.
Hear, hear.
The honourable member for Milton.
Thanks, Mr. Speaker. It's a real privilege to highlight two incredible organizations in Milton that are making a profound difference in our community. First, I'd like to acknowledge the Special Friends Network and their inspiring Dream Kitchen initiative. By partnering with the Halton Down Syndrome Association, Chef Brandon Bousfield and team are creating opportunities for those with special needs to develop employable skills, build confidence, and create lasting friendships. With help from the Milton Optimist Club, they're delivering some of those meals that they create to people who need a little bit of help over these holidays. I also want to commend the Tigerjeet Singh Foundation on their 16th Miracle on Main event. It was amazing, Mr. Speaker. It included a toy and a food drive, and it's a true testament to the spirit of giving and celebration. It's very heartwarming to see local families, businesses, and volunteers all come together to ensure that every family in Milton and across Halton region have a really enjoyable Christmas holiday season. Both organizations embody the true meaning of community, compassion, generosity, and care, and I'm so proud to support the work they do, and so grateful to everyone in Milton for building a brighter place for everyone. Merry Christmas, happy holidays. Really looking forward to seeing everybody this year.
Merry Christmas.
The honourable member for Lac Saint-Jean. Mr. Speaker, on December 4th, my great riding of Lac Saint-Jean held the annual, the inaugural opening of a new business, an investment of $25 million at a time when the forestry sector is facing a number of problems. This is a source of pride and optimism to see such a project go forward in Saint-Monique. And it's a relief for the mayor, for the workers, and for the entire community. This business, which has very modern equipment, will be able to use wood fiber in an optimal way to increase its productivity and develop new products. I obviously want to congratulate Mr. Louis Fresne, Mr. Laberge, and the entire team at Monosera who have put in place this vision. With this project, Monosera will be a keystone of success in the region. Congratulations to the entire team.
L'honorable député d'Orléans.
The Honourable Member for Orléans.
Mr. Speaker, as 2024 comes to an end, I want to extend my warmest wishes to everyone in this House and to the people of Orléans. As the representative of the most beautiful riding in Canada, I want to take this opportunity to express my heartfelt gratitude to each and every one of the residents of Orléans. Your unwavering support, your leadership, and your dedication to our community have made a profound impact. Together, we've built a strong and vibrant community that I'm proud to represent. J'espère que cette
I hope that this holiday season will bring you peace and joy, and that you will enjoy the time spent with loved ones.
To a fantastic start to 2025, a year of new opportunities, dream realized, and continued success. Joyeuse fête.
Merry Christmas.
Happy holiday. Happy Hanukkah. Happy Kwanzaa. Happy New Year. Bonne année, Orléans.
Happy New Year, Orléans.
The Honourable Member for Saskatoon University.
After 9 years, this Liberal government has unleashed crime and chaos from coast to coast to coast. Nationwide, violent crime has skyrocketed by 50% since this Prime Minister took office, while violent gun crime has increased by 116%, using weapons smuggled over our insecure border. Let's look at the numbers closer to home. In Saskatoon, crime has absolutely exploded, and it is the result of the decisions of this out-of-touch NDP government. Violent crime is out of control. For youth, it is up over 113% since 2019 alone, and assaults and robberies that saw the largest increase. In 2024 was already the worst year on record for Saskatoon in terms of number of murders, and the year isn't over yet. The NDP Liberal Coalition does not care at all about victims. Only common sense Conservatives will bring home safe streets by securing our border and giving jail, not bail, to violent repeat offenders.
Here, here.
The Honourable Member for Sault Ste. Marie.
Speaker, today I rise to pay tribute to the Honourable Ray Startini, who recently passed away. Ray became one of the first judges of Italian descent appointed to the bench in Ontario. He was a champion for fair representation and legal aid. He was proud of his Italian heritage and West End upbringing in the Sioux. He shared his traditions, stories, and experience by documenting them and publishing several books. He was a force outside of the courtroom, actively volunteering on many community boards, including the Soup Kitchen, Ken Brown Recovery Home, Algoma University, YMCA, Children's Aid Society, Algoma Public Health Unit, and the St. Joseph Islands Lions Club. And a family man, a dedicated husband, a husband that was always there for his wife, there for his 4 children, and their 12 grandchildren and 2 great-grandchildren. Ray's motto was, "Leave the wood pile higher than you found it." Truly a Northern Ontario great. Thank you, Ray, for your lifetime of service. I want to say thanks. You will always be remembered. Grazie.
The Honourable Member for Brampton Centre.
Mr. Speaker, in Brampton, safety is a major concern. Community safety must be our top priority. Doug Ford's government should make it their priority as well. Instead, they have been blaming the federal government for their failure. The government of Ontario needs to get their acts together. But according to CBC investigative report, since 2020, 56% of charges in Ontario get withdrawn, stayed, dismissed, or discharged before going to trial. We have passed tougher bail laws, created new offenses, and tougher penalties. We also gave them $121 million to help prevent gun and gang control. It's time for the province of Ontario to take action, stop playing blame games, and provide money for the policing and the justice system.
The Honourable Member for Montmagny, Lilley, Kamouraska, Rivière-du-Loup. Mr. Speaker, once again today, after 9 years of this Prime Minister, Canadians are once again going to suffer the consequences of this Liberal government's lack of leadership. The Prime Minister is in a fiscal feud with his Finance Minister, who will definitely blow past the $40 billion deficit limit, a limit that she promised herself. Mr. Speaker. They've broken yet another promise. It's become the Liberals' signature move. The Prime Minister imposes inflationary policies, then gets angry with his minister when, surprise, surprise, she's unable to manage Canada's economy. And who's going to replace the Finance Minister after she's dropped by the Prime Minister? None other than Mr. Mark Carney, an unelected person responsible for the carbon tax who has already hurt Canadians with this irresponsible and inflationary tax. The solution is simple, Mr. Speaker. Stop. 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 Stop all this spending. Stop raising taxes. Stop feeding inflation. Stop digging us into a deficit. It's not complicated. Just stop.
Alors, s'il vous plaît.
Order.
The honourable member for Sydney, for Sydney, Victoria.
Mr. Speaker, on November 30th, I was honoured to attend the signing of the Red River Métis Self-Government Recognition and Implementation Treaty in Treaty 1 territory and the homeland of the Red River Métis with the Minister of Crown and Indigenous Relations. Mr. Speaker, it was the first of its kind. This co-developed modern treaty will recognize the Manitoba Métis Federation as the government of the Red River Métis with an inherent right to self-government and lawmaking powers over its own citizenship, election, and other internal operations. Furthermore, this signing marks an important milestone on the path of reconciliation as Canada's first self-government treaty with a Métis government. Mr. Speaker, this is about self-determination as stipulated in the United Nations Declarations on the Rights of Indigenous People. I look forward to continuing a partnership with Indigenous governments on future self-government treaties as we move forward towards true reconciliation.
The honourable member for Sturgeon River, Parkland.
Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister has lost control of spending and his cabinet. He forced his Finance Minister to blow through his ridiculously high $40 billion guardrail, and now he's getting ready to throw her off the fiscal cliff so he can replace her with his phantom Finance Minister, Carbon Tax Carney. This is a man who will spend whatever it takes and take our country down with him as long as he gets to stay on as Prime Minister. Even members of his own caucus are sounding the alarm on his self-made, miserable, reckless fiscal disaster. The Liberal member for St. John Rothsay says it's time to show fiscal restraint, and the Liberal member for Thunder Bay Rainy River says his preference would be for zero deficits, but admits that it's never going to happen. The Prime Minister won't listen to his own caucus. He won't listen to anyone. But maybe he'll get the message that we've been sending him again and again. It's time to axe the tax, build the homes, fix the budget, and stop the crime. Let's have an election so our common sense Conservative team can get our country back on track.
The honourable member for Hastings, Lennox and Addington.
This Prime Minister has lost control of spending and his cabinet, and this week this Prime Minister's fake feminism was on spectacular display. He is smashing Canada through $40 billion fiscal guardrail and pushing his female Finance Minister off the glass cliff to make way for Carbon Tax Carney. He did it with his Justice Minister, he did it with the Treasury Board President, and now he's doing it to the Finance Minister after crushing the $40 billion safeguard she put in place. Just 2 days ago, he stood in a room full of equality stakeholders and advocates and said, "I am and always will be a proud feminist." It is beyond insulting that he says this as he actively plots to destroy the $40 billion fiscal guardrail, replace his female Finance Minister with an unelected stooge, while blaming the women around him for his poor choices. Pure hyper-hypocrisy. Mr. Speaker, this fake feminist Prime Minister is not a feminist. He's an opportunist, and he's not worth the cost.
I would just like to remind members about a ruling that I said before about people who are outside of Parliament to make sure that they are judicious in their choice of words, especially since they can't be here to defend themselves. The honourable member for Surrey Newton.
Mr. Speaker, I am proud to rise today to highlight the affordability measures our government is implementing to help Canadians save more money of their hard-earned money. Starting on December the 14th, the new GST-HST tax break will allow Canadians to keep more money in their pockets during holiday season. Additionally, we celebrated a significant milestone in affordability and healthcare this week, the one-year anniversary of the Canadian Dental Care Plan. Since its launch, over 1.2 million Canadians have received vital dental care. Before the CDCP, 1 in 4 Canadians skipped dental visits due to financial constraints. Cost should never be a barrier to health care in Canada, and we remain committed to ensuring accessible care for all. And I wish all my constituents and all Canadians a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year.
Order. The honourable member for Cowichan Malahat Langford.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today to speak about my friend, my former MLA, my constituent, a proud resident of Langford, and the 36th Premier of BC, the Honourable John Horgan. On Sunday, I'll be attending the memorial service for John, where we will gather to honour the lasting legacy he leaves for his family, his community, and our beautiful province. I had the privilege of knowing John for almost 20 years, and I have a lot of fond memories of our relationship. He was an excellent purveyor of dad jokes, often repeating them again and again. Among my favorites was his quip in our region about having to drive west to get to East Souk, drive east to get back to the West Shore, and drive north to get to South Cowichan. The relationship we enjoyed didn't change when he was Premier. Even when he was at a busy community event surrounded by people, he would always make sure to point me out, saying, "Hey, there's my MP." John, you were one of a kind. I will sincerely miss you.
Order. The honourable member for Longueuil Saint-Hubert. Mr. Speaker, the ACEF in Longueuil is celebrating 50 years of community involvement as an organization that defends consumer rights and promotes financial education. Since 1974, ACEF has supported thousands of local citizens by helping them manage their personal finances, by fighting for responsible consumption, and through their consultations, workshops, and awareness-raising initiatives, ACEF has established itself as a key ally in promoting financial independence and debt prevention. With a committed and caring team, ACEF in Longueuil stands out for its human and personalized approach, offering indispensable support for people when they're in times of vulnerability. This anniversary is an opportunity to salute the tireless work of their staff and volunteers, as well as the profound impact that ACEF has had on the lives of so many families. Today, we are celebrating half a century of solidarity and dedication in the service of the community, and we wish ACEF continued inspiration and continued support towards a more serene financial future for the people of Longueuil. Happy 50th anniversary to the ACEF Longueuil.
The honourable member for Stormont Dundas South Glengarry.
The Prime Minister has lost control of spending and his cabinet. Next week's fall update is teeing up to be yet another dramatic disaster because at this point we're not even sure who the Finance Minister is going to be by Monday. The Globe and Mail reports that tensions between the Prime Minister and the Finance Minister have never been worse and getting more intense by the day. She wanted to run a gigantic $40 billion deficit, what she called her guardrail. Now the Prime Minister is pushing her through that guardrail and over the fiscal cliff. And now he learned he wants to humiliate her further by firing her and replacing her with carbon tax Carney. Even Liberal MPs are calling all this chaos out by saying, quote, "The federal budget is not an unlimited pot and we need to show fiscal restraint." Well, that's a little late after 9 years. Yeah. This week, Prime Minister has lost control of immigration, borders, spending, inflation, the debt, and even his ministers. Common sense Conservatives on this side, meanwhile, are fully united behind our leader and ready for a carbon tax election.
It's really going to be a backbench day today.
The honourable member for Kitchener South Hespeler.
Mr. Speaker, this holiday, our government followed through on its promise to put more money back into the pockets of Canadians. With a tax cut for everyone, we're making sure businesses can succeed and families can have a little less stress this holiday season. The Conservative leader's response? Instead of supporting Canadian workers, the Conservatives are prepared to cut essential services like childcare, healthcare, and pensions, services that Canadians depend on every day while doing nothing to reduce costs for families. Canadians deserve better than what the Conservatives are proposing. Our tax cut announcement is a perfect example of how our government is ensuring that workers and families can afford what they need and have saved for what they want, while Conservatives shout empty promises.
That's right.
Questions orales. Oral questions. The Honourable Member for Regina Capel.
The Prime Minister has lost control of spending and his cabinet, and the fiscal feud over the $40 billion guardrail is worse than we ever thought. New reports show that the Prime Minister is set to replace Canada's first female finance minister with his old boys network pal, Carbon Tax Carney. And Canadians are on the bus watching in terror as the Prime Minister is yanking her out of the driver's seat so that Carney can send us smashing through the guardrail and over the cliff. Does the Finance Minister still have her hands on the wheel, and will the deficit be below that $40 billion guardrail?
The Honourable Minister of Justice and Attorney General.
Mr. Speaker, I'm delighted that the first question from the Conservatives relates to the economy and the Finance Minister. Let's talk about the work she's been doing on behalf of Canadians. Yesterday, we had a 50 basis point interest rate cut announced by the Bank of Canada.
Every time.
That was the 5th time in a row, leading the entire G7, we've seen the interest rates come down from the Bank of Canada. On Saturday, we have a further great news for details for Canadians, which is a GST tax cut on basic essentials for every Canadian from coast to coast to coast. That's groceries, that's things that you buy for your kids for Christmas. That's great news for Canadians under the leadership of this Finance Minister.
Dude's freaking trying to dance. He always goes left to right.
The Honourable Member for Regina Capel.
Even the bank admitted that they had to cut rates because the economy is performing so poorly under this NDP Liberal Prime Minister. And, you know, Canada's phantom finance minister has been pulling the strings for a while. Carbon Tax Carney has been forcing radical new spending and forcing the finance minister to smash through a $40 billion guardrail. And now that Canadians are fed up and angry, the Prime Minister is going to blame her, dump her, and replace her with Carney. A classic example of an incompetent boss blaming subordinates. Does the Finance Minister not realize that she's about to join a long list of cabinet ministers that have had their careers and their reputations ruined by this Prime Minister?
The Honourable Minister of Justice and Attorney General.
Mr. Speaker, I'm equally delighted that he's talking about the Bank of Canada, because what has the actual Bank of Canada governor said recently? He said, quote, CPI inflation has been about 2% since the summer, and we expect it to be close to target on average over the next couple of years. On inflation, what has Tiff Macklamachi said? Quote, we are no longer trying to get inflation down. Government spending is not pushing against us getting inflation down. We have brought it down. That's the handiwork of this finance minister and this government, generating economic growth and being prudent with fiscal management. That's about inflation being on target 11 straight months, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Regina Capel.
If he just read a little further, he'd read that it's not because of anything the government's been doing except causing our economy to slow down and underperform. That's why they've taken this step. But you know, a guardrail is something you're supposed to stay far away from. If you even brush up against it, it's a sign you're way off track. If you smash through it, you go flying off a cliff. Now, even Liberal MPs are terrified and are ringing the bell, trying to get off before they smash through the guardrail. One of them said, quote, I think that if we state that we have a $40 billion guardrail, we better stay within those numbers. And another is begging for a fiscally responsible framework. Will the Prime Minister allow a free vote, or will he force his Liberal MPs to stay on that bus as it goes?
The Honourable Minister of Justice and Attorney General.
Speaker, allow me to reference not just what the domestic Bank of Canada is talking about, but let's talk about what the IMF is stating. The IMF is projecting that Canada will have the strongest economic growth in the G7 on average in 2023 and 2024. Canada is expected to maintain its position as the country with the smallest deficit as a share of GDP among G7 countries, and still by far the lowest general government net debt as a share of GDP in the G7. What's up, Mr. Speaker? Canada's growth and leadership of the G7. That's what's up, and we're proud of it.
Her eyebrows up. That's what's up.
The Honourable Member for Belfast-Lismore-Lévis. Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister has lost control over spending and his ministers. The Minister for Finance promised to limit the deficit to $40 billion, but the Prime Minister pushed her to spend more. The Prime Minister, a fake feminist, by the way, can he finally admit that he's already replaced the first female finance minister with Mark Carney, an unelected man who is already pulling the strings behind the scenes? Order. The Honourable Minister for Innovation. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We have no lessons to learn from the Conservatives, Mr. Speaker. With regards to the economy, Canadians have seen the work put forward by the Liberal government. A key interest rate at 3.25%, Mr. Speaker. A key interest rate that will help families, that will help SMEs, that will help our business people. Soon, there will be a GST vacation. It's Christmas time. I know the Conservatives. I'm sure they have a good heart. Let's celebrate Canadians and our entrepreneurs, and let us celebrate this reduction in the key interest rate. The Honourable Member for Bellechasse-Lévis. Mr. Speaker, now we've seen it all. An incompetent Prime Minister who is pushing his Finance Minister to run up a staggering $40 billion deficit. And now he's blaming her for his failure and is replacing her with an unelected man. And all the while, he struts around equal voice, claiming to be a proud feminist. What hypocrisy! Will the Prime Minister finally admit that his minister is a mere facade now, because he is forcing her to break her promise to respect the $40 billion deficit ceiling? Order, please.
Man, stop muting the mic.
Order. The Honourable Minister for Fisheries and Oceans and Coast Guards. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I see that they've learnt their lessons across the way. I don't have to repeat myself, but we have a member from the opposition, a Conservative, a woman who comes from Quebec. How can that kind of person attack our Minister of Finance, who has implemented the Canadian childcare benefit? I hate to interrupt questions, I hate to interrupt answers, but I must ask the member for Louis Saint-Laurent and the member for Portneuf-Jacques-Cartier to please not order on both sides. Minister. I will ask the Minister for Fisheries and Oceans and Coast Guards to start from the top. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Even if there are Conservative men on the other side who are heckling, that doesn't bother me at all, Mr. Speaker. Women are the ones who tackle men head on. And shame on the opposition, because we have a woman from Quebec, a colleague, and she dares attack our Minister for Finance, who has implemented programs like the Canadian childcare benefit, programs that help women when it comes to childcare, Mr. Speaker. We've implemented programs to help children. The Honourable Member for Salaberry-sur-Roi. Normally, it is here in this House that important votes should take place, but today it's happening in the Senate. Senators will vote upon an amendment that would sabotage C-282 and prevent it from protecting supply management. The non-elected senators will be voting whether or not to respect the desire of elected representatives from all parties to protect our farmers in trade agreements. Has the Prime Minister contacted each of his Senate appointments to tell them to vote on the right side of history, the side of democracy? The Honourable Minister for National Revenue. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I agree with my colleague. Something important is happening in the Senate today. I would like to remind her, however, that now, under a Liberal government, the Senate is filled with independent senators.
Is that a blanket she's
However,
wearing?
Conservative senators, they have to toe the party line. So I'd be curious to hear what they have been imposed. In any case, Mr. Speaker, you know that we have worked hard to transmit good information to senators, and we hope that they have understood how important supply management is for Canada and for Quebec. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Order, please. The Honourable Member for Salaberry-sur-Roi. I appeal to all party leaders. Each and every one of them voted to protect supply management in trade agreements through Bill C-282. But today, senators will vote either to respect our will or to overturn the decision in a complete breach of the very basic principles of democracy. Leaders, the farmers of your ridings are watching you closely. Will all party leaders, starting with the Prime Minister, ask senators to defeat the amendment and pass C-282 in its entirety by Christmas? The Honourable Minister for National Revenue. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Supply management is something we believe in. We will continue to protect it. We've also committed to reducing our market share. We have done everything possible to go to the very end of this bill and see it adopted because it is essential. We have to be careful, Mr. Speaker. This bill protects our producers and farmers, but until there is a government that will get rid of supply management. The Honourable Member for Rosemont-la-Petite-Patrie. Mr. Speaker, we have to protect supply management
Purple and blue
for
with
farmers and
dots.
producers in Quebec and throughout the country.
That ain't it,
Emergency
man.
rooms are overflowing. People can't even find a family doctor. The governments in Ottawa and Quebec aren't doing what's needed, and what's more, the private sector is too expensive, it doesn't even work. Therefore, we have fewer services for Quebecers. Let us be clear, Mr. Speaker. Profit has absolutely no place in our healthcare system. It is up to the governments of Quebec and Ottawa to ensure fast and fair access to healthcare. Why aren't the Liberals doing anything at all to defend access to healthcare services for Quebecers? The Honourable Minister for Health. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Well, absolutely we are here to defend our universal healthcare system, and this from coast to coast to coast. That is the reason for which we have signed an agreement with every single province and every single territory to the tune of $200 million to improve our healthcare system. Absolutely. Provinces and territories have their responsibilities, but we will always be here to make sure that people can get healthcare.
The Honourable Member for Windsor West.
Mr. Speaker, last night the Prime Minister met with the Premier to discuss Trump's tariffs. Canadian workers were not consulted, and yet it's their jobs that are at risk. Instead of waiting for the next threat for Trump or premiers running off with their own plans, why not create a Canadian plan that protects and increases our jobs? The Conservatives parrot Trump's talking points even after they fired 1,100 border officers when they were in power. Canada needs to turn the tables on President-elect Trump by promoting Canadian jobs and a workers' plan in manufacturing and natural resources. They have Buy America. Where's our Buy Canada?
The Honourable Minister for International Trade.
Mr. Speaker, Canadians can count on our government to play as Team Canada to defend Canada's interests. Prime Minister met with the First Ministers
How are you
yesterday.
still in office?
I proudly can say in this House that I, along with my colleagues, have met with Canadian workers all across the country from coast to coast to coast to reiterate how important this trading relationship is. Their voices, workers' voices, business voices, and all of our voices matter in this important relationship, and we're going to keep working hard to make sure that this continues to work for Canada.
Hear, hear. The Honourable Member for Battleford's Lloydminster.
The Prime Minister has lost control of spending and his cabinet. The Finance Minister promised to cap the deficit at already reckless $40 billion, but now it turns out the Prime Minister is shoving her through her own guardrail. The fake feminist Prime Minister is setting up Canada's first female finance minister to take the hit for his reckless spending so that he can then officially bring in the unelected man who has been pulling the strings. Why is the Prime Minister bullying the Finance Minister into breaking her $40 billion deficit guardrail promise and forcing her to deliver carbon tax Carney's fiscal update?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Finance.
While the Conservatives are focused on this soap opera, Parliament Hill, grapevine, gossip, Mr. Speaker, our Liberal government has been focused on the pocketbooks of Canadians. Inflation is way down. It's at 2%, and the Governor of the Bank of Canada confirmed yesterday that it's going to stay at about 2% for the next few years. Interest rates are way down. We saw another jumbo rate cut yesterday, Mr. Speaker. That means more money in the pockets of Canadians because they're going to be able to renegotiate their mortgage at a lower rate. We're going to be able to help all Canadians that have loans, and our small businesses and entrepreneurs are going to see costs going down.
The Honourable Member for Battleford's Lloydminster.
Canadians cannot afford this Prime Minister's fake feminism. He had the gall this week to say, and I want you to know that I am and I always will be a proud feminist. You will always have an ally in me and my government. All while working overtime behind the scene to throw Canada's first female finance minister under the bus for his reckless spending.
Under the rickshaw.
Will the so-called feminist prime minister set aside his hypocrisy and admit that he is responsible for forcing the finance minister to break her $40 billion deficit promise?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Thank you, Speaker. I was also at the Equal Voice Gala the other night, and I heard the Prime Minister's speech. I heard him talk about all the tangible measures that we have taken as a government to advance equal rights among genders, including a gender-neutral cabinet, including $10 a day childcare, including a women's entrepreneurship strategy. I also heard the Deputy Leader of the Conservatives and her speech, which completely undermined the whole...
I really do apologize. I've been having trouble hearing
the
Honourable Parliamentary Secretary answer the question. Members really must not take the floor when others are speaking. The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Thank you, Speaker. I was also at the Equal Voice Gala the other night, and I truly enjoyed the Prime Minister's speech, which listed dozens of things that we have tangibly done as a government to advance gender equality, including a cabinet that has equal numbers of men and women, including $10 a day childcare, including a female entrepreneurship strategy, $500 million going out across the country to end the process of gender-based violence. Meanwhile, the Deputy Leader of the Conservatives in her speech completely undermined the whole point of equal voice, Mr. Speaker. It's very telling about what the Conservatives think about equality.
It's like a balloon that's ready to pop.
Order.
She's hanging out with old Lizzie May.
The Honourable Member from Peterborough Kawartha.
This fake feminist Prime Minister is determined to decimate Canadians' lives by destroying the economy, and he will throw anyone under the bus to do it, including his token finance female minister. Canadians know he's weak. They know he's lost control of his cabinet and his spending. The question is, will the first ever female finance minister have the courage to stand up to that fake feminist prime minister and stick to her promised $40 billion deficit?
Which is already enough as it is.
The Honourable Minister for Indigenous Services.
Mr. Speaker, here's something tangible that the Leader of the Opposition could do. In the next election, he could run more women, and he could get more women in those seats. If he really wants to prove his credibility in terms of standing up for women, let me just give you some stats, Mr. Speaker. In this current House of Commons, 16.9% of the women elected sit here in the Liberal benches. How many in the Conservative benches, Mr. Speaker? 6%. That's the kind of numbers that we are talking about.
That's because women typically vote more Liberal.
Order.
and men are typically more conservative. If you look at the way Canadians vote, women are typically more left-leaning. Not to say
I'm
there
certain
aren't
all
right-leaning
members
women,
want to hear the question from the honourable member.
That's got
the
nothing to do
member
with
from
the way
Peterborough,
Pierre runs
Kawartha.
his bench.
Mr. Speaker, on the Conservative side of the House, women stand here because we're skilled and we're allowed to use our voice.
Yes. Good answer. Good answer. Great answer.
Mr. Speaker, Jody Wilson-Raybould is testament to this. That is a fake Prime Minister, but that is not the point. We're not here to talk about gender. We're here to talk about the economy, and it is destroyed under that fake feminist Prime Minister. So again, if she is not a token, will she stand up to him and say, no, I will abide by my $40 billion deficit guardrail to help this economy get back on track and save Canadians' lives?
Here. Couldn't have said it better. You couldn't have said that any better, Michelle. Just a great answer.
I know that all members are keen to return back to their constituencies for the Christmas break, but until that point, please, let us treat each other with respect. And that means not speaking when the Speaker is standing or when someone is recognized by the Speaker to take the floor. The Honourable Minister for Crown Indigenous Services.
Well, Mr. Speaker, that woman might feel like a token, but I never do. I earned my seat in this House of Commons.
So did she.
Mr. Speaker.
So did she.
And you know why they don't like numbers, Mr. Speaker? Because the numbers don't speak in their favor. There are 30% of these seats taken by women, Mr. Speaker. Fully 17% of those are here over on this side. More than half of the women elected are Liberals, Mr. Speaker, and the other half are the rest of the parties combined. So they should do their job, Mr. Speaker, as parties and get more women to run.
Order!
What do you mean get more women to run?
Order! The honourable member who is about to speak is deserving of having her voice heard. The honourable member for Calgary Nose Hill.
The Prime Minister, who has long self-described as a feminist, starting in July and through anonymous sources, have repeatedly maligned Canada's first female finance minister by undermining her competency. This week, reports have suggested that the finance minister has been at odds with the Prime Minister, who's been bullying her to blow back her already exorbitant $40 billion deficit. And now we've got female cabinet ministers defending the Prime Minister's decision to bring in an unelected man to replace her job. Why?
Good question.
The Honourable Minister for Diversity and Inclusion.
Mr. Speaker, I always find it a bit rich when Conservatives talk about feminism, when their own leader will use hashtags on his YouTube videos to attract men who hate women. Mr. Speaker, it is anything but feminist when they bring forward backdoor legislation to ban abortion in this country, or when they all vote against increased funding to combat gender-based violence or to support survivors. Their leader doesn't care about women or equality. He only cares about himself. Shame on them, Mr. Speaker.
That
just grinds my gears. Order. The Honourable Member for Calgary Nose Hill.
Well, the fact remains, Mr. Speaker, that after months of reports that the Prime Minister wanted to turf Canada's first female finance minister, we find out today that he's in talks to put an unelected, conflict of interest-riddled man into the role. The Globe and Mail story must have really stung for every single Liberal backbencher who has carried the water of this scandal-plagued Prime Minister for years. Why wouldn't they be getting this job? So my question is this. Does the Prime Minister really think that there is no one in the elected Liberal caucus who could be the finance minister? Anybody? No one?
None of them have any degrees of economics. Hey, Bill,
the
thanks for the
Honourable
super chat,
Leader
man.
of the Government in the House of Commons.
Thank you,
Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the nature of the questions coming from the opposition today speak more about their opposition to feminism than it does our commitment to feminism. But that's typical, Mr. Speaker, because actions speak louder than words in this case. When we brought forward things like the Canada Child Benefit or childcare, actual policies that help women, what did the Conservatives do? They voted against it. When we stand up for a woman's right to choose, what do the Conservatives do? They vote against it, bring in backdoor legislation to make it harder to access sexual health and reproductive rights in this country. When we work to make contraceptives free in this country, what do the Conservatives do? Stand in opposition. The real fake feminists are those folks on the other side of the Conservatives.
À l'ordre, s'il vous plaît. S'il vous plaît. Order, please.
The Honourable Member for Rivière-du-Nord. Mr. Speaker, the report on Islamophobia tabled by the Justice Committee recommends that the federal government implement all the proposals made by the Senate in 2023 on the matter of Islamophobia. The Senate's recommendations, however, are a full-out attack on Quebec's secularism, which the Senate considers racist and Islamophobic. If this report was intended to combat Islamophobia, it has failed. It promotes Quebec bashing by claiming that Bill 21 encourages racism in Quebec. The government must reject the entire anti-Quebec report by the Justice Committee. Will it do so? The Honourable Minister for Public Services and Procurement. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Like my colleague knows full well, committees of this House are independent. They have the right and the duty to do the work that they want to do. Their recommendations are publicly shared, of course. And like all other members of this House, we will read these recommendations and see how they could be used or not be used. The Honourable Member for Drummond. The Justice Committee has taken up the demand by Amira El-Gawabi that teachers be chosen on the basis of their religion rather than their competence. So what does Ottawa have to do with the hiring of university professors? Is there a Minister for Higher Education in Ottawa and they forgot to tell us in Quebec? Secondly, this proposal is the opposite of secularism. It's bringing religion back into our schools. And we saw what happened in Bedford and Saint-Maxime. Quebecers want nothing to do with this. When will this government stop attacking Quebec's secular model? The Honourable Minister for Public Services and Procurement. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Once again, committees of this House are independent. They do the work they deem to be useful for Canada and Canadians. Quebec universities are also independent and do the work that they wish to do with their jurisdictions and responsibilities. The Honourable Member for Drummond. The Senate has issued a report accusing Quebec secularism of all the wrongs. The Minister for Immigration says nothing. Amira El-Gawabi calls Quebecers anti-Muslim. The Immigration Minister has remained silent. The Justice Committee tables a report repeating the Senate's anti-secularism arguments. Not a problem for the Minister for Immigration. Ottawa proposes choosing teachers based on their religion. Still great news for the Immigration Minister, apparently. But if François Legault wants to defend Quebec secularism, the Minister suddenly loses his temper and condemns a Quebec Premier. Why is this Minister lashing out at Quebec in particular? The
Lady in the back there looked like she was about to fall asleep.
Works and Procurement. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Bloc MPs are doing everything they can to seek out squabbles, but we're not going to be part of this.
Je ne sais pas ce qui s'est passé.
I'm not quite sure what happened on the other side of the aisle, but when it is not your turn to talk, when you're not recognised, it's important to not speak. If you want to have a chat among yourselves or a squabble among yourselves, then you can do so in the antechambers.
Member from Halton, Norfolk.
The Prime Minister has lost control of spending in his cabinet. The Liberals are about to smash through a $40 billion deficit guardrail. The media is reporting that the Prime Minister is forcing inflationary spending on Canada's first female finance minister by forcing her to break through the $40 billion deficit guardrail and pushing our country over a fiscal cliff. Everybody knows that Mark Carney is the de facto finance minister. So why is this prime minister bullying the first female finance minister and forcing her to take the fall?
You don't hear much from Ms. Lewis, but when
the
she does talk, she's quite
Secretary to the
intelligent.
Minister of Public Safety.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I think what we're seeing here today is Conservatives trying to make feminism great again. But what they actually do is they don't elect women to their party. The leader actually uses misogynistic hashtags that promote violence against women. Mr. Speaker, they don't support reproductive health care for women. They want to ban abortion health care for women. Mr. Speaker, when it comes to feminism, it's pretty clear Conservatives are struggling, and this seems like a fight they don't want to take with us.
Bring back Michelle. Can we get Michelle Ferrari to answer that again?
The honourable member for Haldeman Norfolk.
Mr. Speaker, feminism will always be great when there's no tokenism. The hypocrisy of this Prime Minister knows no bounds. He lectures everybody else about progress, saying women's rights and women's progress are...
Well said, Lewis.
À l'ordre, s'il vous plaît.
Order, please.
The honourable member from Halden Norfolk. Please start again.
Mr. Speaker, feminism will always be great when there's no tokenism. The hypocrisy of this Prime Minister knows no bounds. He lectures everyone else about progress, saying women's rights and women's progress are under attack. My question for this Prime Minister is, will he park his hypocrisy and stop attacking the rights of women in his own caucus? Is this fake feminist Prime Minister going to really bully Canada's first female finance minister and have her read Carbon Tax Carney's update on Monday?
The honourable minister for Crown Indigenous Services. For Indigenous Services.
That member is fully endorsed by the anti-abortion organizations that look for candidates, indeed a full 40 of them over there, that bully women when they want to make choices about their own reproductive freedom. Mr. Speaker, it's a little bit rich for members of Parliament from the opposition to get up and stand up, say they stand up for women, when on the backside, they're working as hard as they can to restrict women's freedom in this country.
They've never once said that they want to get rid of abortion. They've never said that. Freaking beating a dead horse, man. It's like the security clearance thing.
Member for Portneuf,
just get over it. Quit saying the same thing over and over.
Sorry, my apologies. Order, please. The honourable member for Portneuf-Jacques-Cartier. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Prime Minister, this fake feminist Prime Minister, is out of control. Time to take stock. He's lost control of immigration. He's lost control of the management of public funds. He's lost control of his own ministers. And now he's bickering with his finance minister. She's already plunging Canada deep into a huge deficit, but the Prime Minister says we can always go deeper. He even plans to replace her with Mark Carney, a non-elected official, if she doesn't do what he wants. On Monday, will the minister present her economic statement or Mark Carney's? The Honourable Minister for National Revenue. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. What's absolutely disgusting in the discourse we're hearing today, like calling the Prime Minister a fake feminist when he has shown umpteen times that he is a real feminist, while they, on the other side, the Prime Minister has been committed to equality, to women, to the rights of women in many ways. What they are doing across the way, these people that love petty politics by putting hashtag to attract misogynist men, what they are doing is showing full disdain for the Minister for Finance.
Alors, j'ai demandé au...
Order. I would like to tell the member for Portneuf-Jacques-Cartier that he's had a chance to ask his question. I asked people to quiet down so they could listen to his question, and I would ask him to do the same for others and to not take the floor unless he's been recognized by the chair.
The honourable member for Vancouver East.
Settlement services agencies have received notice of massive funding cuts of up to 70% to their budget. This will decimate the delivery of critical services to help integrate newcomers. Two NDP provinces, BC and Manitoba, seem to be targeted with the deepest cuts. Case in point, after 3 decades of providing essential language training to newcomers, Vancouver Community College will lose all of their funding, even though 92% of the students get employment afterwards. Why are the Liberals punishing newcomers, settlement service agencies, and VCC's wildly successful language training program?
Good question.
The Honourable Minister for Immigration, Citizenship and Refugees.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Every 5 years we review the funding model for the settlement services to welcome newcomers, to let them learn, make sure that they learn English, make sure that they learn French, integrate them to the new country, overcome trauma. This is something that we can be very proud of as a country. Obviously, this year we have reduced the levels of people that we are welcoming into the country. That comes with some cuts and some readjustments. But clearly, this is a sector that is critical to the integration of newcomers. We will continue to fund it generously and continue to help people integrate to this beautiful country that's the best in the world.
The honourable member for Edmonton Strathcona.
Albertans are paying millions of dollars in healthcare fees for their aged loved ones who are stuck in hospitals because there are no spaces in long-term care. This is one more example of how Daniel Smith is turning our universal public healthcare system into a U.S.-style for-cash system. We know the Conservatives would cut public healthcare, and in true Liberal fashion, this government is clearly too weak to stand up to Smith's privatization schemes. Why is the government sitting by while Albertans are forced to pay to get the care their loved ones deserve?
Hear, hear. The Honourable Minister for Health.
Mr. Speaker, everywhere, every part of our health system must be transformed into a system of prevention rather than a system of illness. We are doing our part. In fact, I would point out just this week announcing 1.25 million Canadians who've received care under dental care. Moving forward with pharmacare, deals with every province and every territory. And yes, provinces must be held to account and be responsible for their share, for the portion that they carry and have burden for. We will lead nationally, and we demand that everybody rise to this moment to transform our health system.
Hear, hear. Leonard.
The honourable member for Pontiac. Mr. Speaker, the holidays should be a stress-free period for Canadians, for all Canadians. But we know that that's unfortunately not the case for some. And during the holidays, sometimes there are extra expenses which can make it hard for some families. I'd like to hear from the minister what our government's plan is to help families during difficult times for certain families. The Honourable Minister of Fisheries and Oceans. Mr. Speaker, whether it be the Canada Child Benefit, the Canada Workers Benefit, or tax breaks for small business, we will always be there for Canadians. With the GST break, we will be giving Canadians a little more money to spend during the holidays. The Grinches on the other side of the House only have empty promises and slogans to offer. The Conservatives are playing partisan games, but our government will continue offering real significant support to Canadians.
The honourable member for Calgary Forest Lawn.
The Prime Minister lost control of spending in his cabinet. He sent this spending spat spiraling out of control, forcing his finance minister to smash through her $40 billion deficit guardrail promise. He then solidified his fake feminist credentials by appointing carbon tax Carney as a de facto finance minister after using her. Even the PBO confirmed they smashed through their $40 billion deficit guardrail by at least $6 billion. Will the Prime Minister confirm the deficit is not a penny over $46 billion?
and ask members not to make noises. There's actually rules in this place for us not to be slamming desks anymore. The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary. I'm certain the Honourable Member had finished his question. Yes, he had. The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Deputy Prime Minister and the Minister of Finance.
It seems that we've lost a quorum in the House, Mr. Speaker, in part because the Conservatives have been attacking female elected representatives, women in this House who represent women and men across the country proudly, Mr. Speaker. If the Conservatives are really interested in asking questions of the economy, I do have answers for them. Yesterday, the Bank of Canada lowered interest rates yet again, making it easier on Canadians to buy a new home, making it easier on families that need to renew their mortgage, making it easier on Canadians that have loans, Mr. Speaker. We're keeping our eye on the ball. We're keeping our eye on the interests of Canadians.
The Honourable Member for Calgary, Forest Lawn.
The last time the bank dropped 50 basis points on the interest rate was 9/11, the global financial crisis, and COVID. And carbon tax Carney's comeback fueled his fiscal feud further. The weak Prime Minister used the Finance Minister to rack up debt, and now he's going to replace another female minister, but this time with Davos elite carbon tax Carney. All of this just to smash through his $40 billion deficit guardrail and drive Canada's finances off a fiscal cliff. Once again, will the Prime Minister confirm the deficit won't be a penny past $46 billion?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Finance.
Listening to the Conservatives today, you would think that the Conservative Party of Canada wanted interest rates to be higher, Mr. Speaker. You would think that the Conservatives want inflation to be higher, Mr. Speaker, listening to their talking points today in the House of Commons. Mr. Speaker, we have invested in Canadians and we have invested wisely. We have ensured that 110,000 more Canadian women have entered the workforce thanks to our early learning and childcare program. This has saved families nearly 30% in childcare, but it has also created $32 billion of greater wealth in our economy. Mr. Speaker, we are growing the economy and we're doing it wisely.
L'honorable député de Chicoutimi.
The Honourable Member for Chicoutimi-Le-Fjord. Mr. Speaker, this Prime Minister has lost control of his finances and his cabinet. We all know that there's a fiscal feud between the finance minister and the prime minister. She promised Canadians that the deficit would not exceed $40 billion, which was her fiscal guardrail. When you smash through a guardrail, it's too late to break. You just end up falling off the cliff. Will the prime minister promise that the deficit will not exceed $40 billion?
L'honorable secrétaire parlementaire.
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Finance. The Conservatives seem to be asking about the economy, Mr. Speaker, but actually they are desperately trying to deny the fact that yesterday the Bank of Canada reduced interest rates in order to help Canadians, Mr. Speaker. That's great news. That will make life more affordable for families that need to renew their mortgage. It will also let our SMEs and entrepreneurs have lower costs and will help young people who are aiming to buy their first home. The Honourable Member for Chicoutimi-Le-Fjord. Mr. Speaker, this Prime Minister has completely lost control of spending and he's lost control of his cabinet. He's bringing in radical spending increases and is sacrificing his own Minister of Finance. And he, in fact, wants to replace her by a man by the name of Mark Carney, who has not even been elected. Canadians have already fallen victim to this government's disastrous mismanagement, and now they will be paying for the deficit. Can the Prime Minister confirm that the deficit will not exceed $40 billion? The Honourable Minister of Fisheries and Oceans. Mr. Speaker, we've already answered that question, but what I'd like to know, Mr. Speaker, we on this side of the House have brought in actual programs to support women. How is it that the Conservative Party has voted against investment in programs like are programs to support seniors, for example, when we know that women tend to live longer than men. They voted against programs for childcare. They voted against school lunch programs, Mr. Speaker. They voted against dental care. And they're going to keep doing that kind of thing. The Honourable Member for Saint-Hyacinthe-Bagotte. Well, Mr. Speaker, it's clear now. The car map is a complete fiasco. Already, it was going to exceed its budget by 50%. The bill had climbed to 556 million, but then in March, maintenance costs had brought that to 625 million. That was in March, so that means that by today, things might actually have climbed above 800 million. And the app probably has cost a lot since it started being used as well, because it broke down 22 times in a single month. So as of today, what is the real cost of this fiasco?
Secretary to the Minister for Public Safety.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And as it's been clarified in the House, the CARM system was to replace a 36-year-old system that was at risk of failure. This was actually developed in 2010, this process under the previous government, and it was to address concerns raised by the Auditor General in Canada that we risked 20% of our goods at the border being misclassified. Mr. Speaker, we're going to ensure that the new system is working and that there aren't delays at the border.
L'honorable député de Saint-Hyacinthe-Bagotte.
The Honourable Member. Whenever the Liberals take on some kind of digital project, well, the bill is pretty high. Imagine what happened with Phoenix, which is still
that is
causing
a big tie.
nightmares for public servants.
Who
9
said
years
that?
later.
It is a big tie.
Or ArriveCan, which was supposed to cost $80,000, but instead ended up costing $60 million, which was mostly to benefit dubious businesses that did not offer services. Meanwhile, the CARM system cost at least $625 million, probably more, but we don't know because the government doesn't want to tell us the real cost, as we just saw. Why is it that each time the Liberals take on a digital project, it ends up turning into a scandal?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Public Safety.
Mr. Speaker, I appreciate the question because it's an important reminder that the CARM system that was replacing a 36-year-old system actually put at risk assessing $40 billion worth of duties and taxes annually. Mr. Speaker, we have to make investments to ensure that the border system and processing of these taxes and duties are being done efficiently and effectively for today's businesses, and we've ensured that any IT issues that need to be worked out are not impacting borders or any delays at those borders.
The Honourable Member for Bay of Quinte.
Mr. Speaker, this Prime Minister has lost control of his spending, his cabinet, even his own MPs. And as this government is set to blow through the $40 billion deficit guardrail, Canadians are feeling it everywhere, including the grocery store, a place the Prime Minister has never been. It's not just Canadians, his own MPs are feeling it. The member from Thunder Bay said his personal preference would be to see the government run a $0 deficit, but that won't happen. Mr. Speaker, since the Prime Minister won't visit grocery stores, won't listen to Canadians, will at least listen to his own Liberal MPs and decide not to run a dime after $40 billion.
Here. Good question.
The Honourable Leader of the Government in the House of Commons.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Well, I'm glad to hear the member opposite talk about groceries because I have great news for him. This House actually passed a GST tax holiday over the next couple
Most of the
of months.
groceries
to
are already
reduce the cost
exempt.
of groceries. But, Mr. Speaker, I'm sorry, I forgot that member and all members of the Conservative Party voted against that because even though they say they want a tax break for Canadians, when it comes time to actually giving them one, they're opposed to it. But on this side of the House, we're happy to be able to provide that extra relief to Canadians on groceries, on toys for kids, on clothing for kids, and other essential items. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Bay of Quinte.
Mr. Speaker, this government's so out of touch, they don't even understand that that's only saving Canadians $4.51 because there is no GST on groceries, just pop and chips. But here's another number. The unemployment rate is up to 6.4%. This Prime Minister has lost control. And as this government is set to blow through the $40 billion deficit guardrail, it has its own MPs thinking about unemployment. The member from St. John said it's not an unlimited pit, and importantly, the Prime Minister and the Finance Minister are not even talking. Before the Prime Minister loads up his MPs on the unemployment bus, will he tell them about the $40 billion deficit guardrail, or will he just drive them over the fiscal cliff?
The Honourable Leader of the Government in the House of Commons.
You know, Mr. Speaker, for many Canadians, the GST tax holiday actually makes a difference. Just because it doesn't make a difference for that member of Parliament doesn't mean it isn't meaningful for many Canadians. Right. And when I speak to constituents in my community, when I speak to small business owners, when I speak to restaurants,
do you whisper when you do that too?
How important this GST tax holiday is going to be for them over the next couple of months. So just because the tax break isn't meaningful for Conservative MPs doesn't mean it isn't meaningful for Canadians. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Cumberland Colchester.
Speaker, the Prime Minister has lost control of his spending and his cabinet. He is also bullying the Finance Minister into crashing through the $40 billion deficit guardrail. Even Liberal MPs are uncomfortable with the financial consequences. Ask the member from St. John Rossay, who was quoted calling for fiscal restraint, or the member from Thunder Bay Rainy River, who said that he wanted a zero deficit, which we all know is not going to happen with this NDP Liberal government. If the Finance Minister crashes the deficit through the $40 billion guardrail, will the feckless Prime Minister allow a free vote for his MPs?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Finance.
Interesting that the Conservative member chose to talk about bullying in his question after today's question period, which has been fraught with bullying from Conservative members. To get back to what's important to Canadians, I would like to talk about the economy.
Somebody play a tiny violin.
When looking at the numbers, we can see that consumer confidence is up. We see consumer spending is up. And, Mr. Speaker, folks are looking forward to the tax holiday that is also coming up. On Saturday, we will be removing federal taxes. We'll be removing GST from everyday goods in order to help Canadians with a tax cut I know they need.
Then I have the deputy that was.
The Honourable Member for Ottawa Vanier.
Let Perkins go. Come
Thank
on.
you, Mr. Speaker. Yes. Yesterday, I was very pleased to visit Willis's College dental assisting students to celebrate the first anniversary of the beginning of the Canada Dental Care Plan, which will enable more than 3 million additional Canadians to consult a dentist, because 1 out of 4 Canadians has avoided seeing the dentist because of the expense. Could the Minister tell us how this plan is making life more affordable for Canadians? The Honourable Minister of Public Services and Procurement. I'd like to thank my colleague for Ottawa Vanier for an excellent question. The bad news is that when you ask the Leader of the Opposition why he's against the dental plan, he says it's because it doesn't exist. And he's discouraging seniors from signing up. But the good news is that they are not fooled by what he's saying. 2 million Quebecers, 3 million Canadians have successfully signed up to the dental care program, which has saved them on average $760 a year since they signed up. This is very good news for all Quebecers and bad news for the Conservative leader.
I hate that smirk on his face that he does.
The Honourable Member for Calgary Centre.
Mr. Speaker, this Prime Minister has lost control of spending and his cabinet. Former advisor to 2 Prime Ministers, Robert Asselin, has said the rising debt burden limits Canada's ability to act during future economic slowdowns and unforeseen circumstances. The Minister of Finance set a fiscal guardrail of a $40.1 billion deficit in her last budget that looks drastically off the rails. This isn't just a number. It's a glaring sign of systemic overspending and poor fiscal planning. The Liberals' choice now is clear. Will they heed their former advisor or drive Canada's deficit off a cliff?
The Honourable Minister for Innovation.
Mr. Speaker, this member is so off rail that he forgot that Canada, actually, Mr. Speaker, is the land of opportunity and possibilities. You don't need to ask me, Mr. Speaker. Talk to CEOs who have invested in this country, Mr. Speaker. Just in 2023, We landed the largest investment in Dow's history in Fort Saskatchewan, Alberta, Mr. Speaker. I think the Conservatives should all rejoice. It's Christmas, Mr. Speaker. I hope they're going to put that in their Christmas card to their constituent to thank this Liberal government for bringing jobs in Alberta.
The honourable member for Calgary Centre.
That's the minister that's never seen a check he didn't want to sign of Canadian taxpayer dollars. You can't. Well, former Liberal advisor Robert Asselin also stated you can't pick and choose fiscal anchors as you go and renege on a commitment you made only a year ago. There's a huge disconnect here. The Prime Minister wants to spend away to popularity, and the Finance Minister is trying to hang on to a shred of fiscal accountability. Liberals are famous for taking no lessons, but this one's an obvious choice. How far past the guardrails is the Prime Minister pushing the Finance Minister's credibility?
The Honourable Minister for Innovation. Order, please. The Honourable Minister for Innovation.
Mr. Speaker, thank you very much for the question. Mr. Speaker, actually, there's more good news for their Christmas card, because let me talk about another investment in Canada, Mr. Speaker. This time, BHP, Mr. Speaker, the largest mining company in the world, have made its largest investment in its history in Saskatchewan, Mr. Speaker. In Saskatchewan, close to $20 billion, their largest investment in their history. Mr. Speaker, I hope again that in their Christmas card that they're going to send to their constituent, they're going to thank this Liberal government for bringing jobs in Western Canada, growing our energy sector, and making sure
The honourable member for St. Margaret's, South Shore St. Margaret's.
The Liberal minister is so informed he doesn't even know Canada Post is on strike. Another lost cabinet minister. More leaking Liberals are speaking out about the economic disaster of this Prime Minister who's decided to crash through his $40 billion deficit guardrail promise, an obscene number in its own. And the Liberal MP for St. John said that Liberals need to show fiscal restraint, like that's going to happen. Crashing through his promised $40 billion deficit will increase the cost of food. So if the deficit guardrail is broken and driven right through, will the Prime Minister allow his Liberal MPs a free vote?
L'honorable ministre des Pêches et Océans et de la Garde côtière.
The Honourable Minister of Fisheries and Oceans. Mr. Speaker, we have already answered this question. What I want to know from my colleague across the way, who is from the Atlantic region, what I want to know is how they could vote against investments in small vessel ports. How could they vote against investments in the Coast Guard? How could they vote against, in the supplementary estimates, how could they vote against investing in fuel for the Coast Guard so that they could help save our fishers when they're experiencing problems offshore?
Somebody get her a comb so she can brush her hair.
Again, when members are afforded the respect to ask a question, I'd expect them that they would also have the respect to listen to the answer. Minister, please. L'honorable député de Sudbury.
Mr. Speaker, from supporting wildfire response here in Canada to deterring aggression through our multinational battle group in Latvia, members of our armed forces have continuously stepped up to keep Canadians safe so we can live in a more secure and peaceful world. For our armed forces who are separated from their families while on deployment, this can be a hard time of the year. Can the Minister of National Defence tell us how our government continues to support our armed forces so they can do the crucial work of keeping us safe at home?
The Honourable Minister for National Defence.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to begin by thanking the member from Sudbury for a question, but also for her hard work on our very hard-working Defence Committee. As we head into the holiday season, I would like to take this opportunity to express our sincere gratitude to all members of the Canadian Armed Forces and to the entire Defence team. They've answered the call to serve and defend their country, and they have our confidence, our pride, and our gratitude. I also wish to extend our thanks to their families and all who support them in this essential work. Mr. Speaker, à tous les membres des forces armées canadiennes.
To all the members of the Canadians our Canadian Armed Forces, I would wish them a very happy holidays and a happy New Year.
From Courtney, Alberta.
Mr. Speaker, for 70 years, Friendship Centres have served as vital community hubs for urban Indigenous peoples. Now they're on the front line of Canada's mental health crisis, the toxic drug crisis, and catastrophic climate events like floods and forest fires. But federal funding hasn't kept up. The National Association of Friendship Centres are clear in that they need $62 million of federal funding annually to meet their demands. The Liberals keep letting Indigenous people down with their chronic underfunding. Will this government finally provide Friendship Centres with long-term, sustainable funding?
Hear, hear.
The Honourable Minister for Mental Health and Addictions.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I want to thank the member for his question, and I agree with him. Friendship Centres provide essential services to some of our most vulnerable people in our communities.
Why is
Their
her
network
eyebrow
offers
still stuck?
culturally appropriate, mindful support to navigate healthcare systems, finding safe shelter, and learning Indigenous languages, as well as supporting our Indigenous communities when they go into urban centres. They also provide mental health services. But, Mr. Speaker, with this work, $32 million goes to them every year, and our government has committed an additional $60 million through Budget 2024. There is more work to do. They do incredible work across communities in Canada, and we'll work with them.
The Honourable Member for Richmond, Arthabaska. Mr. Speaker, in my riding there are several businesses that are struggling because they can't renew their temporary foreign workers' work permits because now they're over the new threshold, which the government lowered by 10%. The unemployment rate is extremely low right now. So these businesses' survival is threatened. And in addition, there's the human cost of these workers who may need to leave the country against their will and their families. So what will the Prime Minister do to help these businesses to keep this essential workforce while also respecting immigration rules?
L'Honorable Ministre des Anciens Combattants.
The Honourable Minister of Veterans Affairs. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Ever since we came to power, our government has made significant changes to this program. The Temporary Foreign Workers Program needs to meet the real-time needs of the labour force market. For Canadians, we have tightened up the program because there have been changes in the labour market. We are listening to what Canadians need, and we will take strong action. Thank you.
Colleagues, following discussions among representatives from all parties, I understand that there is an agreement to observe a moment of silence in memory of John Horgan, former Premier of British Columbia. À la suite des discussions
Following discussions among representatives of all parties in the House, I understand that there is an agreement to observe a moment of silence in memory of John Horgan, former Premier of British Columbia.
Hopefully we get a couple points of orders after this, and then we're going right to committee. You can already see a few members have left the House to go for committee. Garnett and the chair, and can't remember what Conservative MP was with him. But we'll be covering Mark Holland. He'll be there for an hour, and then we're going to switch over from that committee to another committee where they're talking about the CBSA is in the other committee and the RCMP is in the other committee, and they're talking about what they're doing to protect the border in case Trump does actually enforce tariffs and that kind of stuff. So we will be in committee for 2 hours, and then that's it till Monday.
I thank all honourable
Larry
members.
Brock is still there. He's still sitting in the chamber.
I see that the honourable, there are a number of folks who will be, there are a number of people who are going to be raising points of order, and they have been given notice to the chair, and the chair will recognize them in the order in which they have been, delivered. The Honourable Minister of Justice and Attorney General.
Mr. Speaker, regarding Bill C-63, if you seek it, I believe you will find unanimous consent for the following.
I'm afraid that there is no unanimous consent for what the minister would to propose. On a point of order, the honourable member for Calgary, Nose Hill.
Mr. Speaker, if you seek it, you'll find unanimous consent today for the following motion. Given that Bill C-63, the so-called...
I regret that the honourable member from Calgary, Nose Hill, doesn't have unanimous consent for her request for unanimous consent, rather.
Point of order.
It being 3:24, the House will now proceed to the taking of deferred recorded division on the previous question for the motion to concur in the 9th report of the Standing Committee on Veterans Affairs. Comme il est 15h20.
As it being 3:24, the House will now proceed to the taking of the deferred recorded division on the previous question to the motion to concur in the 9th report of the Standing Committee on Veterans Affairs. Call in the members.
Yeah, what's going on with Scheer? He's sitting over there talking to Champagne on the Liberal side. I wonder what they're talking about. But we are going live for committee in 5 minutes, guys. I've put the link. I've pinned it up at the top. I've gone ahead and typed it again in chat. So we're going to be covering Mark Holland for the first hour in the Health Committee, and he always gets mad. He's very easy to get irritated. Oops, Scheer's walking right in front of her. And then we're switching over to another committee for the second hour where we're talking about Trump tariffs, and the RCMP and CBSA are going to be there. Erin O'Gorman will be there, so she's always interesting to hear from in committee because she never answers questions and always tries to dodge. She's a very typical Liberal. So links there in chat, guys. We've got 4 minutes, so I will see you guys in the committee. And you guys know we don't go live on Friday, so we'll basically be live again on Monday, Tuesday, and then that's it. We're no live streams for about a month because they get so much time off. So it'll just be clips on the top of the channel. You see where I have my Stay Informed playlist. It'll just basically be clips for a month. I'll just be keeping up with them talking to reporters, press conferences, things like that, but there'll be no live streams for a while. So Erin O'Gorman is a big liar. I agree. Quick shout out to the fan funny. We got Pokey with the super chat. We had Bill Vickers with the bomber 13. Appreciate you. Alice again with the super chat. And then we had Shed and Sheba join the club. So welcome into the CCC club, guys. Appreciate you. There's the link one more time in chat, guys. I will see you in committee. And cheers, guys. If we don't see you in committee, we'll see you on Monday. So appreciate everybody tuning in and have a good evening. But do tune into committee. You won't want to miss this one. It's going to be good. So they get almost 7 weeks off. I think it's 5 weeks for Christmas, but then they get 3 months off in the summer, and they get a week off for Remembrance Day. They get 2 weeks off or a week and a half off for Thanksgiving. They get a lot of time off. It's a little ridiculous. But, yeah, I'll see you guys in committee, guys. Come on, let's go hop over to that link.